So let's hear it again for Tiffany Wilson. So this month we are on the journey home to the self, home to the center of our being, to God, to the birth of the Christ within. And so this week we're going to call in the wisdom and presence of the wise men and look to those wise beings who have blessed us in our lives, both on a personal and on a global level. So our teachers, our mentors, our parents, our aunts and uncles, grandparents, all of those. And the power of wisdom is an important one. Charles Fillmore said that when we truly awaken to our own inner power of wisdom, then we no longer rely on worldly wisdom or conventional wisdom, but that we have our own intuition and discernment to guide us through life. So I want to begin a little bit with some of the scripture from the book of Matthew, chapter 2. And behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And to this day, we emulate the three kings by exchanging gifts with one another. We emulate them bringing the gifts to the Christ child. But the wise men brought more than presents. They brought their presence, right? Because they went on this journey and their intentions were pure. Their intentions were clean. And we know this because when Herod is trying to find out where they are, and they could have sort of cozied up to Herod and got some worldly success or recognition there, and instead they went home by another way when they realized that Herod was trying to destroy the Christ child instead of to help. They also fall down and worship the Christ child, and whenever we worship, whether it be in meditation, in prayer, in compassionate and empathetic listening, we are in presence, are we not? It calls us to be into that present moment. So as we move into this Christmas season, it's likely that your life is going to get busier, right? Many of us have holiday parties to attend or family obligations that we need to take care of, buying gifts for one another. And we can get so caught up sometime in the commercialism of Christmas that we forget to be truly present. And the other thing about Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa too is that whenever we have special holidays like this, it makes everything bigger. So when things are going great, they're better. But when things aren't so great, that's bigger as well. So it's a time when, if someone's missing from your life, you really feel it this season, right? You feel it more than at any other time. And we might choose to want to escape and not be present. But here's the deal. If things are going really well in your life right now and during this Christmas season, enjoy it. Bask in it. Be like, wow, this is so great that what I have. And if on the other hand you're alone or you're suffering or something's up with you, be with that as well. Be present to that as well, because that's what we're called to do in our spiritual practice in our life. So a woman named Susan Weiss gave us some lists of things about ways. This is how you know when you're not present, okay? So 1, you forget how you got to where you are. Now, this could be metaphorical and real. How many times have you gotten in the car and the car automatically started driving to work when you weren't going to work. Or it also could be like, wait a minute, how did I get here anyway, like in my life, you know? So that's one way that we know that we're not present. Another way that we know that we're not present is we avoid situations where something could go wrong. And what she means by that is when we live in our heads, it's easier than throwing ourselves into the experience, right? So you might have this great idea. I know I'm going to do whatever that is, and as long as it's in the head, we're wonderful at it, right? We're great successes. Everything's easy. But when you throw yourself into the actual experience, things could go wrong, you know? Maybe you don't do it so well. So it's another way of not being present. Another way of not being present is always thinking about what comes next. So rather than being here, it's like, well, I'm going to have breakfast, or we're going to have a meeting after this, or, you know, what's happening this afternoon, or even in life. I'm in this place now, but where am I heading? And it keeps us always on this treadmill. There's this wonderful story, an ancient story about a stone cutter. And he's carving the stone, and he's like, you know, I'm just a lonely stone cutter. I mean, really, nothing. I'm not much of anything. Because what I would really like to be is the richest prince in the kingdom. And boom, just like that, he finds that he's the richest prince in the kingdom. And he's like, hey, this is pretty cool because now I have all this power. I have all this money. I'm the guy. And then he looks up and he sees the sun, and he's like, the sun is bigger and feels more powerful than I am. I'd like to be the sun. And so, boom, all of a sudden, he's the sun. And he's really enjoying that, you know. He's like, he's the sun. There's nothing more powerful than the sun. And then this cloud comes along and starts covering up the earth, and he can't see it. And he's like, hey, I want to be that cloud because I don't like the fact that something's blocking my view. So then he becomes the cloud, and he's having fun making it rain and just kind of cruising around, and he's like, this is good. And then all of a sudden he feels something pushing him, and he's like, wait a minute, what's pushing me? Oh, it's the wind. And he's like, I don't want to be pushed by anything. He goes, I want to be the wind. And so, boom, he's the wind. And now he's like, this is great, because he's like all over, and he's knocking things down, and he's just being this wonderful force of wind. And then he sees this great stone on this mountain, and he's trying to push it, and he's like, I can't push that stone. I want to be that stone, because that's the most powerful thing. And so he becomes the stone, and he's like, this is it. This is it. Now I've got it. I'm immovable. I'm omnipresent. I'm not omnipotent. I'm omniscient. I'm here. And then he hears a little click, 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 click. And he looks down, and he sees there's a little stone cutter that's clicking away and changing him and turning him into something new. And he says, this can't be happening to me. I can't be changing. And so what does he want? Of course, he wants to be the stone cutter again. But is that not how we are sometimes? It's like, we're here, but we want to be there, and then we're there, and we want to be over here, and maybe if we had this, things would be better. And so there's this constant movement and this constant changing and not being present to where we are. Again, the most important gift that we can give this season is being present. Susan Weiss says, the thing about being present is that you can't only be present to the pleasant things. You have to take the unpleasant ones along with them. So, how do we stay present? The first thing is to recognize that try as we might, we really can only do one thing at a time. So we ought to do that thing wholeheartedly. And most of our time is spent in the past or the future rather than the present. And what we end up doing is passing through that moment on the way to somewhere else. And in doing so, we miss this moment. And that's how life ends up passing us by. We do it to ourselves. And we've all done it, right? We've all done it where we're just sort of marking time like, okay, once I get through with this, then I'll be good. But our wise teachers are telling us that it's important that we stay present to the moment. So, another story. And this is about another ancient story, and it's Chinese. And this this ancient teacher was talking to his students, and he goes, I really wish I had a serious student among you. And they're like, hey, what are you talking about? We've been with you for like years. We're serious students. And he says, no, he said, I don't believe that any of you are serious students because I'm speaking of real knowledge and preparedness. I seek students who are ready to embark on the way of enlightenment, and you're not ready. And they said, well, tell us how. What do you mean? And he said, whoever knows how to do just one thing well, even if it is to prepare a simple cup of tea with full attention, that person is wise enough to begin. So we're back again to that one thing, right? So what is that one thing that is calling you in your life? So many of you know Matt, Corey, and Becky, right? Matt's going to he directs our choir, and when is choir day? The 23rd. He will be directing our choir. And many of you know that Matt and Becky got married about a year ago, and everybody was waiting, like, when are Matt and Becky going to get married? They dated for 13 years, right? And so when they came to talk to me about the wedding, I said, so why is it taking you guys so long to get married? And Matt loves movies. He loves movies, and he quotes movies all the time. And he goes, well, you know the movie City Slickers, right? Yeah, sorta. He goes, well, there's a scene in there between Curly, who's played by Jack Palance, who's the wise old cowboy, and Mitch, who's played by Billy Crystal. And Mitch, the character, is so enamored that he's with Curly. He's like, this guy knows the secrets of the universe. And he finally gets him alone, and he's like, I'm going to ask him. And he says to Curly, he said, do you know what the secret of life is? And Curly looks at him, and he says, this. And Mitch says, your finger? And he says, no, it's one thing. Just one thing. You stick to that, and the rest doesn't matter. And Mitch says, but what's the one thing? And he says, that's what you have to figure out. And for Matt and Becky, the one thing was raising their kids. So they said, when the kids are launched, when the kids are raised, then we can get married. Because I wanted to do the one thing right. I wanted to do the one thing. I didn't want to bring the kids and have them move and change schools and do all the things that you have to do when you blend families. So if I could do the one thing right, then I'm okay. And then they were free to get married. And of course, it was a wonderful wedding, and we celebrated with them like crazy. So as we again move into the season, there's a tendency to multitask, to not pay attention to what's going on around us. And we are called to Christmas presence, to be fully here with one another. And what is the one thing? If you had to choose, like, what is the one thing that you feel that is yours to do in this life? Now, of course, we also heard the story about making a cup of tea and doing that right. Again, it's all about doing and being totally present to what we are in that moment. So let's close with a prayer as we ponder this idea. So first of all, I invite you to reflect on this Christmas season and just check in with yourself about where you are. Are you happy? Are there wonderful things happening in your life? Make sure that you breathe it in, especially those of you with small children. It is particularly magical. And if someone's missing from your life, and it makes that season like there's a gap there and a hole, just sit with that too for a moment. Don't push it aside. Invite that person or persons into this moment. And if you find yourself alone, if you find that things aren't exactly running smoothly, again, be present. Be present to that as well. Invite it all in. And if you were asked, if you ran into Curly, and he said it's the one thing that you have to decide what that is, what is that for you? What is the one thing that you are called? And again, being present is keeping things not just in our heads, but in our experience. So as you think about that one thing, what is one task or action that goes with it? And know that the Spirit of God goes before you and clears the way. Just as the wise men followed that star, so when we follow that presence within, we too are guided to the birth and the awakening of the inner Christ. And may it spread and bless this entire planet. And for this awareness, and in the name and through the power of the living Spirit of truth, we say thank you and amen.